Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Amon Green, Green Bay Packers all-time leading rusher, and you're watching Packers Total Access Live, your daily source for Packer content. Go Pack, go!
What's up, guys? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. We are live on YouTube, X, Rumble, and Facebook as well. So any platform you choose, we're pretty much live there. You can also find this in podcast form. Just search Packernet Podcasts. Anywhere you get your favorite podcast. We're flying solo tonight. Probably going to be like that for the entirety of the show, as everybody had way better plans than to hang out in here with us and talk ball this evening. Obviously, it's Easter weekend. So once again, happy Easter to everyone who celebrates. And if you don't, appreciate you hanging out with us as well. Hopefully everybody had an awesome day. I see the chat's already filled up here. Man, a bunch of people in here. We got Monster Aggressor, Chris the Casual in, Holmes MD1, Clint, the armchair quarterback in the house. Good to see everybody. Way too many to mention. Larry, Mr. Larry in here. We got Prince, Holmes. Like I said, yeah, everybody filing in now. Pointer Doug. What's up, Doug? Good to see you, buddy. So we got a lot we could talk about, to be honest with you. If you guys got questions, I'm going to try to hit on them in the chat and glance back and forth. But you guys know how difficult it is to try to put together a show and read the chat at the same time. I know Monster Aggressor had one right off the bat here. Not really a question, but a comment. Said, yo, Clayton, we need to hit it out of the park this draft, as if we are competing this bad enough. Our division is stacked. We play some good teams this season. Yeah, listen, the NFC North is going to be stacked, I think, for a little while. Now, we'll see what happens with J.J. McCarthy. You know, everybody's just kind of assuming they're going to pick up right where they left off last year, they being the Vikings, obviously, without Sam Darnold. And, you know, I can understand both sides of the coin there. When it comes to Sam Darnold, because he's played like crap in other places. He played really good last year, and now they no longer have him. So got a first-year starting quarterback, man. Really a rookie quarterback. He has not seen any official regular season game time. I'm almost positive, right? So, you know, that's kind of up in the air. You got the Detroit Lions, who lost all those coordinators, right? Lost both their offensive and defensive coordinator. So we're going to see just how good their head coach, Dan Campbell, actually is. And, of course, you got Ben Johnson jumping ship from Detroit and going to Chicago. And we'll see how that comes together. I'll tell you what I'm really eager to see this year. Everywhere Caleb Williams has gone, he's held on to the football too long. You know, he took a bunch of sacks at USC, took a bunch of sacks in Chicago. They're trying to bolster the line. And I think that's the right way to go, right, is to build up that offensive line in front of Caleb Williams. Now, here's the problem. If you got a sack issue again this year, probably Caleb, right? And one thing that Greg Cosell has taught me, just listening to all of his different podcasts and interviews he's done, is typically, almost always, I mean, this isn't just like, yeah, more often than not, almost always, when a quarterback takes a bunch of sacks in college, they end up taking a bunch of sacks in the pros. So keep that in mind. And with that being said, I look at it a little bit different. You know, I look at the Packers just need to take care of business this year. Really, it has nothing to do with the divisional opponents, in my opinion. You got to take it one game at a time. You know, the Packers won 11 games last year, made the playoffs, right? One of the hotter younger teams, right, in the league, in my opinion. So, you know, you get into this whole caught up in, well, we need to win the North. We need to win the North. Absolutely, that's where it starts. You want to win the North, but the goal is to go 1-0 every week, right? And the old, Mike McCarthy and other head coaches over the years have always said, You want to go 3-1 each quarter of the season. Now, obviously, there's an odd game added in there with there being whatever it is now, 17 games. So you'd like to win that 17th game as well. But you go 3-1 each quarter, you're going to look up at the end of the season and you're in the playoffs, right? The old adage of win 10 and you're in. Now it kind of feels like probably 11 maybe is what you want to shoot for just to be safe. And Packers hitting that 11 mark last year, being the youngest team in the league. So I say all that because I guess I just look at it a little bit different. I don't look at it like you got to win the division. I look at it like you need to win as many ball games as you can. And if you're the wild card going in, so be it, right? The goal is to qualify for the playoffs and go out there and try to take care of business. So I look at that a little bit different, I think, than most Packer fans, honestly, or most NFL fans in general. Pointer Doug said, would you think that Malik would be on the block to move up in the draft? Quarterbacks in the draft seem weak. So would there be so there be the best value we can get for him. The Malik Willis thing's interesting to me. I guess you could kind of group it the same way you would with the whole Jair Alexander situation. And what I mean by that is with Jair, you're going to have another shot to trade him if indeed they have decided, as the reports say, that they've pretty much already decided they're moving on. You're going to have another shot to trade him for those teams that aren't able to secure a good enough cornerback in the draft, right? So immediately following the draft or on draft night, let's say a team goes in and they say, man, we need a starting corner. And they come out of the first 2 rounds and go, dang, the board didn't fall the way we needed it to. Let's go give our 3rd round pick for Jair Alexander. I think the Packers would absolutely accept that. I think they probably would accept the 3rd round pick. You get into the 5th and 6th round, I think that's where they struggle. Now, that may change on draft night. If they get to the 6th round and they're like, okay, obviously people don't see as much value in Jair as we thought. Now we're willing to take a 6th round pick. That's different. But I think the peak of his value is going to be throughout the draft as these teams see their best cornerbacks come off the board, and not to their team, if that makes sense. So in terms of Malik Willis, I kind of look at it the same way. I don't see Malik Willis as a quarterback that teams across the league are looking at going, we would rather have Malik Willis over any quarterback that we got a 3rd round grade or higher on, right? So maybe there's a situation where a team goes, we didn't really feel that need, and let's say we see Malik Willis as worthy of a 5th round pick, then maybe they ask the Packers about that. You guys know I've been pretty adamant about how I feel about Malik Willis. I want him on the team unless somebody will offer a 2nd round pick, and I don't see that happening. I think his value as a backup is way more than a 4th round pick or a 6th round pick. I would much rather not have an extra 5th round pick or whatever it is, and have Malik Willis, a guy who proved last year that he can go out and win ball games if Jordan Love does get banged up. And I don't know, I just remember all the old days of being a Packer fan and always having to worry about, damn, what are we going to do if Aaron Rodgers goes down? The season's over, right? And now we find ourselves in this unique situation where if Aaron Rodgers does miss a game or two, or 6 games, you don't feel like the season's over. Malik Willis showed, and kudos to Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur has shown, hey, I can build a game plan, a run-heavy game plan around this backup quarterback. So that's kind of how I see it. Now, again, back to your question, would you think that Malik would be on the block to move up in the draft? I think just about everybody's on the block, to be honest with you. If a team comes calling for a player, we've seen it with Rasul Douglas, right? I disagreed with the Rasul Douglas trade at the time, and I kind of still do, simply because, and that's just remove the fact of who we drafted there. I can't remember who it was we drafted. For some reason, I want to say Tucker Kraft comes to mind, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But that 3rd round pick, what came down to there was Goody planned on keeping him, and then someone offered a 3rd round pick. The Bills did, and it's like, man, that's too good to pass up, right? So there may come a point with Malik where, I don't know, the value is just going to be too good to pass up on, if that makes sense. So no, don't worry about it. Pointer Doug says, sorry, Clayton, my English isn't very goodly, buddy. My reading skills suck. So we're on the same page there. It's all good, man. All good. All right, so I think we got pretty much everything in there for the most part. Let's jump into some stuff I wanted to cover tonight. I wanted to hit this the other night and we ran out of time. Ari Miroff put a tweet out here, and I'll zoom in on the tweet and then we'll go back to the list. The NFL has updated its list of player attendees for the NFL draft in Green Bay. Quarterback Jackson Dart and defensive end or edge defender Michael Williams are out, so they are no longer attending the draft. Cornerback Maxwell Harrison is in. So that would kind of make you think maybe there's enough draft buzz around Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Harrison to suggest, okay, he's going to be a 1st round pick. Now, does that mean Jackson Dart isn't going to be a 1st round pick? No, it doesn't. Same thing with Michael Williams. I would be very surprised if Michael Williams was not a 1st round pick in this year's draft, to be honest with you. And when I look at Michael Williams, just to kind of see where he's at on our board, I want to say we had him a little higher. Yeah, we've got him in the 20 spot. The Packers had a top 30 visit with him. They met with him earlier in the offseason as well, I think at the Combine maybe, and he meets the athletic threshold. So it doesn't mean Michael won't be taken in the 1st round. It might mean, hey, maybe he was unable to attend, let the NFL know, and that's why they changed plans, right? That could have been it as well. So let's look at the actual list here. This is the entire list of players who are going to be at the draft. So quarterback Cam Ward, no shock there. I think he's going to be the number 1 pick. We'll do a little mock draft. We're going to do a couple mock drafts tonight, and I'm going to show you guys a new tool that I found that's really cool. It's called the Draft IQ Cheat Sheet, and it's really neat how they put it together over at NFL.com. But anyway, Cam Ward, I think he'll go number 1. Jalen Milroe is interesting because some people were saying, hey, he may go to the Steelers at 21, I think is where they pick. Other people were saying, no, he's a slam dunk second-round pick. And just because these guys are at the draft doesn't mean they were invited only because they're going to be first-round picks or they're thought to be first-round picks. You know, we've seen it in the past. Players will slide to the second and third round and still attend the draft, even the ones that don't fall dramatically like Aaron Rodgers did. So Jalen Milroe is very interesting to me. You guys know I've got him as the 3rd best quarterback, and I think I'm the only person on the face of the earth that has him as the 3rd best quarterback. Running back Ashton Gianti goes without saying. Wide receiver cornerback Travis Hunter, another one that's going to be a top 5 pick in my opinion. Wide receiver Matthew Golden, had the fastest 40, I believe, if I remember correctly, fastest 40 at the combine. So I think he'll be a first-round pick, just about guaranteed. Ted McMillan, same thing. I think he'll be a first-round pick. Will Campbell, offensive lineman, whether he plays tackle or guard. I know there's a big – people are arguing like hell on that the entire draft season. I think he'll definitely be a first-round pick. Josh Simmons, I think, will be a first-round pick if the knee checks out. You get those top 30 visits in and out, and you got to make sure that knee checks out if you're going to use a first-round pick on him for sure. Tyler Booker, interior offensive lineman. That's an interesting one. I don't know if he'll be a first-round pick or not. I want to say we're a little lower on him. We've got Tyler Booker in the 38 spot. We've actually got Matthew Golden in the 37 spot as well. But again, with Matthew Golden, that 40 time is really going to project him higher than maybe some teams thought, before he ran that combine 40. Tyler Booker out of Alabama being an interior offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it to the second round. However, Daniel Jeremiah on his initial release of his big board, or top 50, I should say, he was 14th on his list. Dane Brugler had him at 18, and Kyle Krabs had him at 27. So maybe he is a slam dunk for a first-round pick. For me, I'm a little bearish on that, I guess you could say. Defensive end, Abdul Carter, slam dunk, top 5 pick in my opinion. He definitely ain't going to make it out of the top 10. Defensive end, edge defender, Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart will be a first-round pick. There's no doubt in my mind. He's just got too many traits, too many tools. And I know he's a raw pass rusher, but I definitely think he'll be a first-round pick. Defensive tackle Mason Graham will be a first-round pick. That's a no-brainer. Linebacker Jahad Campbell. I think he will be a first-round pick, but with the shoulder injury, you don't know. He may slide to the second. Cornerback Will Johnson will be a first-round pick. Now, whether he goes in the top 10 or not testing or not running the 40 at his individual workout the other day for Michigan, that's, he'll definitely be a first-round pick. The question is, will he be a top 10 pick? And then you got cornerback Maxwell Harrison we just talked about, and safety Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks, we've got him listed as a top safety in the draft. He's 23 on our big board. I think there's a really good chance he is a first-round pick. Nick Emenwore crushed the combine, right? Greg Cosell loves Nick Emenwore. I got the vibe that Nick Emenwore, safety out of South Carolina, was Greg Cosell's favorite safety in the draft. So there's a chance he goes in the first round. And then, of course, you got Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame in the 36th spot. Didn't test as well, obviously. Greg Cosell really likes him, though, just talks about he's always around the ball, that type of thing. So those are the guys that, again, not those latter two safeties, Xavier Watts and Nick Emenwore, they're not invited to the draft, but obviously Malachi Starks is. And being in the 23 spot, I think it's pretty safe to say he's probably going to be taken in the first round as well. So since we're on the subject here, why don't we go ahead and pull up our big board? I want to show you guys and gals what we've been working on here. And Emilio stayed up really, really late last night putting together the horizontal board. So here you've got the vertical board, right? We've talked about this. We pulled information from this the entire time throughout the draft process. And you guys know, anybody who's in our Patreon group, you can scan the QR code in the upper right to join our Patreon group, or just go to patreon.com/Packer Fan Total Access. And you'll have access to this draft board. So we got the legend over here to the right showing you what all the emojis and the colors mean. We've pretty much got all the bases covered. We got it narrowed down to a handful of prospects that really line up with what the Packers like. Shemar Stewart in the 15 spot, Walter Nolan in the 19 spot, TJ Sanders in the 39 spot, Trey Amos in the 46 spot. You got Jordan Birch in the 62nd spot. Then you got to go down a little ways here. You got Anthony Belton. He was a top 30 visit and a Senior Bowl participant. He's in the 115 spot. Ty Felton, I was really impressed with Ty Felton's write-up when we dove into the scouting report on him. He's in the 120 spot as well. Like I said, a handful of guys that are on the Packers short list there. Now, you remember Emeka Egbuka, we've been kind of talking about. He's more or less like the favorite wide receiver to go to the Packers, seeing that Ted McMillan will probably not be there. Now, the Packers met with several wide receivers there that are going in the first round or projected to go in the first round. The reason Emeka Egbuka is not lit up in the gold or the spade is because he wasn't a Senior Bowl participant. And listen, there's nothing he can do about that. Everything else, though, he checks the boxes. Captain Patch met with the Packers early in the process. He also had a top 30 visit. He meets the athletic threshold. You've seen the famous picture of Goody standing right there on top of him doing the vertical as Emeka Egbuka was doing the vertical at the Ohio State Pro Day. It seems like he is on Goody's short list of wide receivers. So appreciate the kind words there, Coach. I'm trying to glance throughout the chat as I'm talking here. But, the board's come together really, really well, man. It was really cool to show Emilio how I build the board. And then I just expected him to kind of be able to help out here and there and maybe throw in, oh, yeah, we can do this because he's real familiar with spreadsheets. Man, he's crushed it. What an asset he's become in draft season. But, yeah, the board has come together really, really nicely here. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other features on the board. And like I said, you guys have access to this in the Patreon group. We can go now. Like if we just go top 30 visits, we've shown you guys this a couple of times. There's all your top 30 visits. The target emoji represents the top 30 visits, right? So you got a list there now of 25 people. Easton Butler thinks there's going to be 2 or 3 that'll probably become public before the draft gets here. I hope he's right. I think last year we got to 28, and then we learned about the other 2 after the draft. So hopefully we'll get as much information on there as we possibly can. So there is your top 30 visits, right? You can also sort in here. You can go just the cheese, which includes the top 30 visits as well. That's all the players that the Packers have shown interest in. 155 prospects out of 562 that are on our board. 155 the Packers showed genuine interest in meeting at some point in the process, right? So that's another cool feature here on the board. Now, the one that I want to highlight, though, if you group it by tier, you hear us talk about tiers. This is how GMs work the boards, okay? And it may be a little bit difficult for you guys to see it here on the stream. Hopefully not. Let me go full screen for you just a second. So you'll notice if you can see my cursor, hopefully you can, all right? So you've got tier -5. That's tier 1, okay? That means anyone who has a -5 to a whatever it is, a negative 0.1, I think is what it would come down to, okay? So that's that top tier, low number wins. And then in tier 0 is basically 0 to 4.9, okay? And when we get to the horizontal board, we did it in increments of 10, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So you've got in the top tier, Ashton Gianti and Abdul Carter, right? And then you go one tier down, you got Travis Hunter, Mason Graham. The next tier down, you got a pretty good cluster here. You got Ted McMillan, Will Campbell, Cam Ward, Armand Membu, and Ty Warren, okay? Then you go to the next tier, and there's only 3 in that tier, Will Johnson, Colson Loveland, and James Pierce Jr. Go down to the next one. You got a pretty good cluster right here. Kelvin Banks, Kenneth Grant, Shemar Stewart, Jahdae Barron, Shedeur Sanders, Mike Green, and Walter Nolan. So that's just kind of give you an idea of how the tiers work on our board, right? Now, let me show you the horizontal board. And Emilio stayed up real late last night doing this. You guys, I'm pretty sure you'll have access to this when he posts a new link once we get everything kind of buttoned up here. But this is what's really cool. It's going to be hard to see, and I'm going to zoom in on portions of it, okay? And you'll notice on our live draft stream, by the way, make sure you're subbed to the channel. We will be in Green Bay, Wisconsin, hanging out at the draft, and then as soon as the draft starts, we will be doing a live stream back at the rental house that we've got, and just continuing the tradition of doing our live draft party type thing. So make sure you're subbed to the channel so you can get on that action. And also be a member of at least the $3 tier on Packer on the the Patreon group as well, because we're going to be doing some giveaways that night. It's going to be really, really cool. We also got a really cool mock draft contest going on, which it's so cool seeing everybody's mock drafts start to file in. It's a lot of fun keeping up with that. So anyway, let's go to the horizontal board. Now it's going to look wonky for a second. You ready? All right. There is the horizontal board. You're going, what the hell am I looking at, Clayton? Let me show you. I'm going to widen it out a little bit here, okay? As much as we can. And I'm going to zoom out just a touch. So what you do on the horizontal board is you put every prospect, right? Put every prospect on the board, and you'll notice at the top of the page, and I'm going to zoom in just a second. I just want you to see how wide it is. Notice up here at the top, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, interior offensive line, defensive line, edge defender, linebacker, corner, then safety. Okay, so you've got the positions running horizontally from left to right. Now, as we zoom in, you'll notice these players in the order of which they are graded on our board, right? They are listed in that order, and we did tiers of 10-point increments on the horizontal board to make it pop a little bit more. Now I'm going to zoom in, okay? So let's go to the very top where Ashton Gianti is. As we zoom in here, you will see how you've got the positions listed, right? So in that top tier, you've got Ashton Gianti, and then, of course, you got Abdul Carter. And then the next tier down from left to right, Cam Ward is your only quarterback in that tier. He's the top quarterback in the draft. Tet McMillan's your top wide receiver. Ty Warren is your top tight end. And notice how you got 2 offensive tackles in this tier. So if you're picking, right, and you want an offensive tackle, and let's say you're picking in the 6th spot, and both Will Campbell and Armand Mimbu are available on the board, you got to ask yourself, okay, Will Campbell has a slightly better grade at 7.0 as opposed to 7.3. You got to create what you call a cluster buster. All right, this is a small cluster. Which one? What's going to be the tiebreaker for these players? You know, for this case, just an example, I'm pretty sure Armand Mimbu, both of them I think have short arms. I could be wrong there. But notice that Will Campbell meets the threshold. Armand Mimbu doesn't. However, Armand Mimbu has a wrestling background. Will Campbell doesn't. Right? So you may want to go age. You may say, all right, which one's the younger of the two? And that'll be your cluster buster. That's what we mean when we say cluster buster on the show. Okay. Then you got Mason Graham at defensive tackle. You got Travis Hunter as the top corner in the draft. And listen, if you want to list him as a wide receiver, that's cool. We all know he can play wide receiver as well. I think the Cleveland Browns are the only team stupid enough to play him primarily at receiver as opposed to corner. That's just me personally. But if you want to put him at wide receiver, then it's him and Tet McMillan in that second tier, but the most valuable wide receivers in the draft. So if I zoom out just a touch here now real quick, and let's look at this next tier, you'll notice Shedeur Sanders pops on the board now, right? So he's in the next tier, quarterback. Then you got Colston Loveland, your next best tight end. You only got 1 offensive tackle in Kelvin Banks. Now look at the D tackles start to pop. Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan are in that tier. So you got to make a decision. Which one do you like more? Kenneth Grant has the better grade, right? But if you look at Walter Nolan, he's in the gold and he's got the spade, meaning he checks all the boxes for the Packers. He was a captain. He visited with the Packers at the Senior Bowl. He meets the athletic threshold. You had him in for a top 30 visit, everything across the board. He's also, in my opinion, a better pass rusher than Kenneth Grant, and he is that true power 3 tech. Greg Cosell's words, not mine. Also, Dane Brugler's words, not mine. So you want someone who can rush with power out of that 3 tech. Walter Nolan, I think, is your guy. Now, Kenneth Grant, a little bit bigger dude, has an overall better grade on our board, so I can understand someone taking Kenneth Grant over Walter Nolan as well. Now, look at the cluster you've got in edge defenders over here. You got James Pierce Jr., Shamar Stewart, and Mike Green. All right. Now, when you look at those, we need to throw the purple box on Mike Green. I got to get with Emilio. We're going to put some color code in this to tell us even more information on draft night. And my goal is to have this printed off and laminated for everybody at our live draft stream, where we'll have one in hand. We can mark them off as we go because we're going to be working the vertical board for you guys and gals on the live stream. It's just much easier to see. Okay. So when you look at these 3, James Pierce Jr., Shamar Stewart, and Mike Green, let's say all 3 of those are on the board when you pick at 23. And they're the best available, right? Well, James Pierce Jr. has the best grade. That seems like it'd be a slam dunk, right? Well, he's not as good of a run defender, and he's a little bit lighter. So that might be a cluster buster for you, right? Shamar Stewart checks all the boxes in terms of, Senior Bowl participant. Packers love their Senior Bowl guys. 8 of their 11 picks last year were Senior Bowl attendees. They met with him at the Senior Bowl. He meets the athletic threshold, crushes the athletic threshold. We all know that, right? And a top 30 visit. So you may look at that and go, no, I would take Shamar Stewart over James Pierce because they're in the same tier. If James Pierce was one tier higher, you may go, I like James Pierce better because he's that much more valuable, right? So in an increment of 5, James Pierce Jr. would actually be graded one tier higher. But again, on the horizontal board, we're going to do it in increments of 10. Mike Green. Now, we all know Mike Green, I think, may be the best pass rusher in this draft, but boy, oh boy, does he got some personal stuff, right? So you got to be aware of that, and you've got to do your due diligence. You being, if you're an NFL GM, we're not in-house. We don't know. Goody may not even have him on his board. Goody may have him as the number 1 pick in the draft going, hey, bub, we did the research. I don't think there's any smoke to that fire, right? Or any fire to that smoke, I should say. We'll take Mike Green, right? He's got a wrestling background. He was a captain. But again, Shamar Stewart out of that cluster, he's the one who checks all the boxes. And listen, you guys know I've been pretty vocal. I'm not a big Shamar Stewart fan. I'm not. I don't like the idea of taking someone just because they've got the athletic traits as opposed to someone who maybe has, far better production in the NFL. If you go on over, you got a couple cornerbacks. Will Johnson out of Michigan with a 12.3, Jahdae Barron with a 17.7. When you look at those two, the Packers actually met with Jahdae Barron, and they did not meet with Will Johnson. Now, that's not to say just because they didn't meet with him, you would take Jahdae Barron over Will Johnson. But when you look at it, there's also injury concerns with Will Johnson. Jahdae Barron does not have injury concerns. You also see the V there, meaning Jahdae Barron's a little more versatile, right? A lot more versatile than Will Johnson, who's primarily an outside corner. Jahdae Barron has played outside and inside throughout his entire college career. So you got a little more versatility there. But again, Will Johnson, 12.3, that's significantly higher than Jahdae Barron, even though they are in the same tier. So I don't want to bore you guys and gals too much with that information, but I want to give you an idea of how the horizontal board works, okay? And that's exactly how it works. So again, if we zoom out, you're just kind of seeing that all zoomed in there. If we go all the way out now to look at the board, you can see just how much information is actually in here. I mean, it's all the way across the board, all the way down. Look how far it goes down, guys. We got 500 prospects in order on this horizontal board. I don't know how we're going to fit it on one sheet for draft night. So we're going to do our best, though. Anyway, that's just a look at the horizontal board. When you hear us talk about it, that's what we mean. And when we go back to the vertical board, we'll get it back to the normal size here. Bang, I believe that's about right. Actually, let's go on in a little bit more. Now back to the vertical board with the tiers of 5. It's broken down a little bit more. This is probably the board that we will work on draft night for the live stream. So hopefully that all makes sense. And everybody understands, what we mean now by the horizontal board. I had somebody ask me a question. They shot me a text. Joseph, I think was the name, and was like, hey, I heard y'all talk about the horizontal board. What do you mean there? There's a little visualization of what the horizontal board is. Okay. So there you go with that. Now let's move along here to, I don't know where I guess I disappeared forever. There we go. All right. Which would be fine with me. Let's move along to a little bit of content we wanted to hit tonight. Read a mock draft from Chad Reuter over at NFL.com, and we put a little article together. I try to keep the articles from getting too wordy. I just want to give you guys the information and share it along here. But the latest mock has the Packers trading up in the first round. So this was Chad Reuter that did a mock draft for NFL.com. It's my understanding he's been pretty accurate in the past. But, people do so many mock drafts. It's, it is what it is. Peter Schrager, in my opinion, is the one you want to watch for. Dude crushes it every year. I mean, absolutely crushes. I'm not saying he's the best of the best. I'm sure you could find some draft Nick on a lowly website that, and I mean that with all due respect, that probably has a more accurate mock draft than Peter Schrager. But Peter Schrager is so plugged in with all 32 teams. He's built these relationships, these working friendships with people like Sean McVay and other head coaches and GMs that he's just got the inside information for sure. So now, as we scroll down, here is what happened with Chad Reuter's mock draft. As the 2025 NFL Draft approaches, anticipation is building for how teams will shape their futures. In the latest and most comprehensive projection, NFL.com's Chad Reuter delivers a gripping 7-round mock draft packed with bold predictions and strategic trades that could redefine franchise. It was released on April 18, 2025. Reuter's mock draft forecasts 5 first-round trades. 5. That kind of took me off guard a little bit because everybody's saying most of these teams, if anything, they'll want to trade down. It's just going to be hard to find a partner and want to trade up because once you get outside of the top 10 picks, man, it's like between 10 and 40, the prospects are pretty much the same. And I love seeing that come into focus because Daniel Jeremiah talked about it right off the bat when he first started diving into the research for the draft this year. Former NFL scout Daniel Jeremiah, he said, man, I think he said from 20 to 60, take your pick. Everybody kind of looks the same, right? Well, now as you get closer to the draft and more information comes out, it feels like it's 10 to 40 is that sweet spot. That's why we're always looking to trade back when we do mock drafts for that very reason, right? Is because you can get just as good or almost as good value trading back 5 picks because you're still in that sweet spot from that 10 to 40. As long as you stay underneath 40, you're in a good spot to still get an equal talent around that spot. Or who knows, maybe a better talent falls to you. You trade back, pick up some draft collateral, and still get someone who projected higher than where you originally thought you were going to be able to land someone. So those 5 first-round trades really kind of caught me off guard. Surprising top 10 selections and a flurry of offensive talent grabs, including quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers from the New York Jets, lending a new signal caller to the Dallas Cowboys, doubling down on offensive firepower. This mock draft sets the stage for a transformative weekend. So what I did was just focus on the Packers picks here, okay? And I just did the top 2. Now, I wanted to point this out, too. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, and I'll try to zoom in enough. This is really cool on NFL.com. My eyes are going across trying to zoom in enough here. I apologize. So it's just got a ton of information. This is kind of like it's called the mock draft tracker for the Packers. And it shows first round trade up likelihood 3 out of 5 stars. So they think there's a decent chance the Packers could trade up in this draft just based off of how the mock drafts have fallen and aligning with the Packers' needs. First round trade down likelihood is actually 2 out of 5 stars. So they feel like there's a better chance of the Packers trading up than down in the first round, okay? Albeit it's not 4 or 5 stars. So, take that as you will. Quarterback need, obviously, projected star being Jordan Love, only 1 star. So I love how they just did that quick breakdown. Do we think they're trading up? Do they think they're trading back? And do they need a quarterback, right? And if you'll notice, you've got the mock draft tracker right here, like it's showing Chad Reuter on April 18th had wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. Mike Band, I think it is. Yeah, Mike Band on April 14th had him taking Jahdae Barron. I'd be okay with both of those. Lance Zierlein on April 1st says Savone Revel Jr. Would be the pick for the Packers at 23. Matthew Golden got picked by the Packers, according to Eric Edholm, back in March 28th. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, was chosen by Charles Davis on March 27th. Will Johnson, cornerback, was taken by Bucky Brooks on March 25th. And then, of course, Maxwell Harrison was taken by Daniel Jeremiah back on March 18th. So you want to key in on the latest information. In this case, Chad Reuter saying the Packers are going to take wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. And then the recent one before that, just 4 days prior, was Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. Okay, so I love that little setup there. And if you'll notice over here, if you go to the website, you can see round 1, it shows Packers draft targets, projected 2025 first-round big board. It shows the players that they think the Packers would be interested in the most, okay? Those players are Will Johnson, Ted McMillan, Jahdae Barron, Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Donovan Ezaraku, and Gray Zabel. The only one I would push back on right there is Donovan Ezaraku because if I remember correctly, and I want to double-check real quick, I'm going to keep the board off the screen, but I just want to make sure I'm not getting him mixed up with someone else. I want to say Donovan Ezaraku, yeah, he does not meet the athletic threshold for the Packers. So that's the only one out of that list that I go, that'd probably be a little bit of a reach in the first round. Even in the second round, maybe Goody goes away from that athletic threshold, though. That's definitely could be the case, right? So I thought that was a really cool little screen grab they had, and then they got some cool little charts, things like that, off-season activity. It's just a really, really cool setup. So with that being said, back to the article, all right? Says, with the Green Bay Packers holding prime draft positioning, Reuter's mock draft offers an intriguing glimpse into their strategy to bolster a roster already showing playoff promise. In this analysis, we'll zero in on the Packers' first and second round approach, dissecting the players Reuter projects to land at Lambeau Field. From addressing key defensive needs to potentially adding dynamic offensive weapons for Jordan Love, Green Bay's selections could set the tone for another deep postseason run. Let's unpack how Reuter envisions the Packers navigating these critical early rounds to solidify their contender status. So what he did was he traded up to pick 19 to take Emeka Egbuka. And I know some people see that and go, whoa, I don't want to do that. I would rather not too. And you guys know I like Egbuka. We were on Egbuka before it got real popular, right? And it's just simply because we looked at the measurables, we looked at the things that Goody likes, we looked at our PFF big board. He's listed at better value than pick 23. That checks the box, right? He meets pretty much all the thresholds other than the Senior Bowl, which he can't control that he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. So with that being said, it made a lot of sense. Now trading up to 19, me no likey that, Jan, right? I would rather, if he is taken, okay, great. Let's just take the best player available when we're at 23 or potentially trade back like we talked about. But, however, if Goody has a high enough grade on Egbuka, this may make sense. If the Packers were to trade up to 19 with Tampa and take Emeka Egbuka, then we know Goody had a damn good grade on Egbuka. Probably a tier, maybe 2 tiers higher than they may have had on anyone else there around the 23 spot, or maybe a tier higher than we even have on him. And again, we've got him, sitting pretty nice on our board here. So it says we haven't seen the Packers draft a receiver in round 1 since 2002. I want to talk about that for a second. Everybody always brings that up as if it's like this horrible thing, right? Here's what's crazy, man. When you look at the Packers, the receivers that the Packers have drafted in the first round, they've only drafted 3 in the first round. Javon Walker was 2002, right? I think we could all say that was a bust. I mean, they had him for a few years. He held out for a contract. I remember Brett Favre speaking out about that and that being a big nasty thing. He ends up going playing somewhere else for just a couple more seasons. It seemed like then he was out of the league. So I think it's safe to say Javon Walker was a bust. But before that, guess who the other 2 receivers were that they took in the first round? It was Sterling Sharp, Hall of Famer, and James Lofton, Hall of Famer. I say that because the Packers don't see the wide receiver position that valuable enough to reach in the first round like you would for an edge defender, a quarterback, a tackle, a defensive tackle. It's funny because I have people push back all the time on the fact that I actually had somebody in the YouTube comments earlier this morning that said, you guys need to do better research. It's obvious that wide receiver is like a top tier importance. I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'm going, Bub, you may believe that. We can agree to disagree, but you're also disagreeing with Bill Walsh. How many Super Bowls did he win? You're also disagreeing with Bill Belichick. How many Super Bowls did he win? You're also disagreeing with Bill Parcells. How many Super Bowls did he win? Right? You're also disagreeing with Michael Lombardi, a former NFL GM, spent his whole football life in the NFL, and now he's the GM at North Carolina. Still weird hearing college football teams have GMs, but that's the day we live in, right? All these people, Ted Thompson, same thing. How can you say that, Clayton? Because Ted Thompson never pulled the trigger on a wide receiver in the first round, did he? So it's obvious he's not willing to reach for that position because he knows it's not that important. I'm not saying it isn't important, but you want to build through 3-tech or defensive tackle in general, edge rusher, tackle, specifically left tackle if possible, and quarterback. Those are the 4 cornerstones of your team, along with a head coach that knows exactly how the hell he's going to use all of those assets that are given to him. So you can disagree with that whole talk that wide receiver isn't that important, but you're also disagreeing with the brightest football minds in the history of the game. I didn't make that up. I didn't wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm smarter than everybody else. I don't think wide receiver is important. I read that in about a half a dozen books and listening to podcasts and audio books of people who have written, it's essentially the autobiography of Bill Walsh, right? In those books is where I uncovered maybe I'm putting too much value on the wide receiver position. So that's how I got to that point. Just giving you a little background there. So anyway, In a bold move, we talked about that, to secure game-changing talent, the Green Bay Packers traded up to the 19th overall pick, selecting Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, the 21st ranked prospect on our PTA big board. Egbuka, known for his crisp route running, reliable hands, and explosive playmaking ability, represents a dynamic addition to Jordan Love's arsenal. This strategic trade-up underscores Green Bay's commitment to bolstering their offensive firepower, aiming to elevate their passing game and keep pace in the high-octane NFC North. So wanted to mention that. And then, of course, the little write-up on him says, we haven't seen the Packers draft a wide receiver in round 1 since 2002, but we did see them move up in round 2 for Christian Watson 3 years ago. With the top cornerbacks no longer available in this mock, Green Bay swaps a 3rd pick for a 5th. So they gave up a 3rd, got a 5th back, traded up from 23 to 19 to nab Emeka Egbuka. All right, so that's their justification of selecting a receiver there. So let's see. This is a great question. IROC says, but does a wide receiver or a nose tackle get us closer to a Lombardi? See, that's the thing you got to look at, right? Kenny Clark last year, we heard about it all year long. Kenny Clark is washed, right? Kenny Clark's done. It's, there's a lot of touch spying going on. That's why I gave a little bit of grace. But let me ask you this question. Let me ask you that question this way, all right? Think of the great team. Let's think of the Packers' last 2 Super Bowl teams, okay? Who was the top receiver for the Green Bay Packers when they won in 1996? Some would say it was Andre Rison, right? Well, they went and got him off the scrap heap, if you'll remember. Some would say it's a young Antonio Freeman. Okay, cool. I can't remember if Robert Brooks was healthy that year or not. I know he got hurt one year, and it's a long time ago. So Freeman, Solder says Freeman. Let's go with Freeman. Now, would you consider Freeman a Hall of Famer? Would you consider him an All-Pro, like a regular All-Pro type player, right? When you look at it and go, okay, in 1996, which one was more valuable to the Green Bay Packers? You guys remember they had the number 1 defense that year? They get swept under the rug all the time, right? They had the number 1 defense in the entire National Football League. Antonio Freeman, if that's the receiver we want to use, or Andre Rison that nobody else wanted in the league and we went and got, or Gilbert Brown. See what I'm saying? Also, someone else who played defensive end and also kicked inside to 3 and 4-eye at times, Reggie White. So which one was more valuable to the Green Bay Packers? Meaning, if you took that player off the team, if you took one of the players off the team and left the other, do they still win the Super Bowl? I don't think that defense is near as good against the run or the pass, to be honest with you. Without Gilbert Brown, it damn sure isn't without Reggie White, who played very versatile on that defensive line, right? As opposed to Antonio Freeman. I feel like if Antonio Freeman, a young Antonio Freeman, wasn't available, they still have a legitimate shot to win that Super Bowl. Now, let's fast forward to 2010, the last Super Bowl the Packers won, right? Who was the top receiver that year? Because I'm pretty sure they had the best defense that year, too. They definitely had a top 3 defense that year because that's when it really popped for Dom Capers, right? Greg Jennings. Would you consider Greg Jennings this all-world player? How come when Greg Jennings left the Packers, he did nothing anywhere else, right? And by the way, Greg Jennings, 2nd-round pick, right? Who anchored? I love it. This is just how my mind works. It's just so simple. I'm an idiot. You guys know by my accent, I'm an absolute moron. So I try to break things down as simplistic as possible. What's the blueprint for winning a Super Bowl? Who was the defensive tackle for the Green Bay Packers? It was B.J. Raji. Who had a pick 6 from the defensive tackle position in the NFC Championship? B.J. Raji. Who anchored that 34 jam front all year long? B.J. Raji. What else did they have at edge? Clay Matthews. Both of them first-round picks. That's how I get to the point where it's like, okay, if wide receiver is best available, yeah, I'm good with it, man. I have no problem. If Ted McMillan's there at 23, run the damn card. Run it, right? But this whole idea that you better reach to get a receiver, got to have a receiver. Guys, we had a good passing game last year. We didn't get beat by the Eagles because we didn't have a rookie wide receiver that is deemed a number 1 receiver. How much of an impact is a rookie receiver going to make his first year in the league anyway, right? But boy, oh boy, if you can go get you somebody in the trenches, 3-tech, edge defender, someone that I prefer a 3-tech because I feel like we've got edge defenders. That's just me personally. We were 8th in the league in sacks last year, and it wasn't because the defensive tackles were so good. So, with that being said, and this is great, Solder says things that have changed since 2010. Wide receivers are more ready to play out of the box. The contract structure for wide receiver is higher. Rules favor throwing the ball. Correct. Now, let me ask you this. Who won the Super Bowl last year? It was the Philadelphia Eagles, right? What was the Philadelphia Eagles' strength in their game last year? It's a common theme. Which is more important? If you took A.J. Brown off the Eagles, right, do you think they still win the Super Bowl? I think there's a good shot. But if you take Jalen Carter out of the middle of that defensive line for the Eagles, there's a far less shot of them winning that Super Bowl, in my opinion. Also, the running game, right? They had a good offensive line. They focused on running the ball, controlling the clock, that type of thing. A.J. Brown's a great receiver, although there are rumors that he may be traded. I don't think that's true, but I just seen that come across earlier, right? The other thing, there you go, bingo. You hit it right here. MG Toe Legends nailed it. Rush with 4. When you can hit home with 4, you can have 7 in coverage. That's what causes a team like the Packers to struggle. And by the way, when you get down by a couple scores, do you think a number 1 receiver is going to be the difference in you getting back in that game? It's probably not, because what's going to happen? Teams are going to start to play a shell, and they're going to force you to go underneath anyway, right? And again, this is just how my football mind fires. So there you go, man. And I love this, Greg Rice. This cracks me up, man. I don't mean any disrespect. If they never score, you never lose. You hit the nail on the head. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, you're probably thinking, well, if we never score, we never win, right? I thought that's the route you were going. But you're right, man. When you put pressure on the other team like that defensively, things change. Things change big time. And again, I'm not saying wide receiver is not important. I'm simply saying this whole idea that we've got to reach for a receiver, I just can't subscribe to. But we're going to continue this conversation on the other side. I plan on doing 1 hour. But boy, oh boy, this is fun. And you guys are lively in the chat. I'm trying to glance and keep you guys involved. I apologize if I'm not doing enough. But we'll continue this conversation on the other side for hour 2. For everybody listening on the pod, we appreciate you. We'll see you over there in just a second.